This year we presented and attended many Quant conferences in Asia, in America, here in London, and with the occasion I was able to sit down with other Quants and see what they're working on, and it appears that overfitting remains a highly researched subject. Overfitting has been with us for a very long time. Today it's very popular with machine learning models, but even at the time when we were using statistical linear models, the problem of overfitting was there. The best way to understand overfitting is the analogy with someone reading a paper, memorizing that paper perfectly, and able to answer any single question on that paper. Now, the fact that the person has memorized the paper, it doesn't mean he understands the subject or he knows something about that topic. And so overfitting appears when you have a problem that is big enough that is able to memorize what is the output that should come when a set of inputs is presented to that model. And so how do you control for that? Because this is a very big problem. You don't want your model to memorize relationships. You want your model to learn relationships, because if it's able to learn a relationship that is durable over time, you can then of course exploit it, you can then of course take advantage of it. So how do you control for overfitting? Well, there isn't really an answer to that. You have various techniques that you can adopt. At Saracen, what we do is we try to control for the size of the problem, i.e. we try to keep the problem we try to keep the model small enough so that we can understand what kind of relationship the model is able to learn. And if you're not able to understand those relationships, if you're not able to, if we see that the output is highly sensitive to a specific input or to a simple variation of the model, then we would just not rely on that model. We will not put it into production. Now, how can you detect if your model is suffering from overfitting? Well, that is a very difficult problem because during the training phase, the model will learn. You find something that works very, very well, and then you need to test it somewhere else. You need to test it on a set of data that has never been seen before. Now, the problem is that even if the model works well in a new data set, it doesn't mean that going forward is going to work, because maybe those relationships have changed. So resolving for overfitting is a big challenge. A few weeks ago, I was in Hong Kong attending the Battle of the Quants, and I presented a very funny example that the audience liked very much. So I was showing a kind of supervised learning exercise using decision trees, and I was first trying to predict the return or the direction of the return of Apple shares tomorrow based on a set of inputs that I think had predictive power. And the result was decent, was okay. And then I said, let me show you what happens if instead of using these inputs that have predictive power, we replace them simply with the weather readings in Washington, D.C. Clearly, there is no relationship between the weather in Washington and the direction of Apple shares the next day. And I was able to prove that using 252 days of training, you would have been able to generate over 200% return by trading a model that was taking the weather in Washington and trading Apple shares. And then obviously you put it into production and you can see that you're losing money and you're not making any money. So overfitting remains a problem, and a good model obviously should have very little of it, although avoiding it, I think it's impossible.